and started to really flex its muscles. Economically, taking coercive measures against other countries, militarily, building up its military, starting to use that military much more assertively, particularly in the South China Sea and the East China Sea and the environs of Taiwan, and just generally starting to really challenge the rules of the road of the international order much more aggressively. And so we're dealing with a different China, I guess is what I'm trying to say, than we have historically in modern times. And so our strategies had to change and our policy has had to change. So as I think about this new environment, I want to focus on 5 areas where I think we should be paying particular attention and investing a lot of our time and effort. The first, as was mentioned in the introduction, is deterrence. And what I mean by that is, efforts to really prevent a U.S.-China conflict whether it's over Taiwan or something else. But such a war involving the great powers and others, presumably, would be truly catastrophic for everyone and for the global economy. And so deterrence is really the name of the game, both deterrence by denial, meaning we need to be able to convince President Xi that he can't be successful using military force to achieve his objectives, and deterrence through cost imposition, meaning even if he could succeed, it would be at such great cost that it would be a Pyrrhic victory. It would not be worth the incredible cost to China and to its standing and influence, to its economy, and so forth. I do think that for the moment, given all of his domestic challenges, given the state of his military, President Xi is focused. When it comes to Taiwan, he's focused, as you all know better than anybody else, on economic and political coercion, shrinking Taiwan's space, putting pressure on Taiwan to change, its posture. But we also know that he has instructed his military, the PLA, to be able to give him options, military options, by 2027. And so I believe we, the United States, our allies, Taiwan, the international community, we collectively need to be ready for a moment in the late 20s when deterrence may be tested. And we need to be prepared for that and to be confident that President Xi, if he does test the waters of using force, that he will conclude that it's too risky and too costly and he cannot succeed. The second key focus area is really strengthening our alliances and partnerships and making sure we are aligned in how we see the challenges and the opportunities, but also how we act collectively. Diplomatically, we know that when China has overreached in the past, when we're able to muster a coalition of like-minded states and entities to push back together, that is much more effective than any single state, making a diplomatic objection. So really working to build the consensus, the coalition to push back on bad behavior on the part of Beijing is a very important element. But of course, we also need to be shoring up our collective defenses. First and foremost, we need to continue to deepen our assistance to Taiwan to be able to defend itself. And I think the moves you are taking towards using more asymmetric measures and coming up with a layered defense that would really complicate life for the PLA if they tried to use force against you is very, very important. But in addition, I think the U.S. and allies and partners also need to continue to shore up our capacity in the region. You see the administration, the Biden administration, very much focused on this, announcing the AUKUS initiative with the UK and Australia, much more deepening of trilateral work with US, Australia, and Japan. much more revitalized and productive Quad, bringing in India, and even many of our posture initiatives, working more closely with the Philippines, for example, and others in the region. So the shoring up our defensive capabilities alongside our diplomacy is very, very important. The third area of focus that I would highlight is really investing to build out our shared toolkit for resisting Chinese economic coercion. So much of what we're seeing right now is economic coercion. And honestly, I feel like this is an area where we need to improve our game. We need to have better responses, better tools to push back against Chinese economic coercion. Obviously, we need to invest in new instruments and approaches on a national basis, but I also think there's work we could do collectively to assess where are our dependencies on China, dependencies that may become vulnerabilities in a crisis, dependencies that China could use as leverage to try to, again, for coercive purposes. And we need to invest in reducing our these individual these particular areas, and we can do that by working together to invest in much more diversified and resilient supply chains that are not wholly dependent on China. I think we can also collaborate when a country or an entity is the object of coercion. We can work more collectively to try to, respond and fill the gaps for each other, reduce the pain for each other. So this is going to require some proactive thinking, strategy, planning before we're ever in a crisis, if we're going to have the kind of economic tools at our disposal to shore up deterrence and response in a crisis. I think the fourth thing I'd focus on, and maybe this is so obvious it doesn't require being stated, but it is investing in the drivers of our own competitiveness at home. This is true for the US, it's true for Taiwan, it's true for others. Accelerating our innovation, making sure that our economies are strong. These are areas where, again, there's a lot that we need to do individually, but there's also much more that we could be doing together to make sure that we stay on the cutting edge of new technologies, of the technologies that are going to define which economies grow, which are most robust, which countries have the best security in the future. And the last thing I'll say is, of course, we have to think, we have to engage China. There's so much where we share interests in working problems like climate change, non-proliferation, and so forth together. But we also have a shared interest in reducing the current level of tensions and trying to stabilize the environment. I do think that when President Xi comes to the United States for the summit at the end of this year, later this year, I think both presidents, Xi and Biden, have this objective in mind, to sort of stabilize the situation, put a floor under the relationship, if you will, and to reduce some of the tensions. I don't expect there to be any major policy changes on either side. I don't expect more than somewhat symbolic deliverables, but I do think increasing dialogue, whether it's restarting military-to-military dialogue or dialogue on arms control, on other issues, I think that's very, very important. We need to find ways to reduce the level of tension, to reduce the level of risk, and to create space for cooperation where it's in our mutual interests. So I'd like to stop there and just again thank you for inviting me to speak. And I think if there's time available, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Ms. Flournoy. We'd like to take several questions, but before that, I summarize the 5 pillars to defend ourselves, defend the democracy, including investing in our toolkits to resist China's economic coercion, investing in our own economy to strengthen our coalition, and last, to improve our deterrence against China's aggression, and thus it's about engaging with China. I think that's all very important. I think build alliance, deterrence, invest in deterrence, then engage with China. I think that is the formula to advance the peace and stability in this region and beyond. So we thank you for the generality of time. So we can take several questions. So I think we take 2 first, and then if we have time, then we can take more. So anyone on the floor would, yes, Ian.
I could just speak loudly, but I don't think Ms. Flournoy would hear me.
No.
No, it's okay. I'll bring you the mic. Thank you. Very good to see you again, Secretary Flournoy. So my question is on the engagement bit. Very simple question. So on what terms should states be thinking about engaging with China on? And how would you suggest states and other entities consider the question of commitment on the PRC side? They could, of course, make some promise, but walk away from it. We've seen that with, say, the Sino-British Joint Declaration over Hong Kong. Thank you.
Right. So, I think, I do think engaging directly with President Xi and the leadership is important because, we've seen under President Xi, China move from a collective leadership model really to a one-man model. And when we communicate with others, in the traditional bureaucracy or the ministries, it's a real question as to whether any of those messages actually make it all the way up to the top. And so I think, at least from a U.S. perspective, I think it's very important that President Biden sit down face to face with President Xi and describe to him how we see things, how we see our interests, how we see Chinese actions, what our objectives are, what we're trying, how we'd like to see things move forward. Talking doesn't mean compromising. It doesn't mean, conceding or giving up your core interests. It just means you have an opportunity to communicate very clearly and very directly. And I think this is particularly important also not only at the presidential level, but on the military-to-military front, on the arms control front. We know that there are elements of Chinese doctrine that are based on fundamentally erroneous assumptions about us. It's really important that we have a dialogue where we can have an opportunity to let that, to try to educate them on that or to share a very different perspective. So I think, but to your point, I think we have to be very careful about things like joint declarations and joint statements, because here there's a history of putting out a joint statement where we think we're agreeing on the terms and then having China either interpret those terms in a completely different manner than what was intended, by the U.S. or others, or simply depart from those in the future. So I think we have to be very clear-eyed, we have to be careful, we have to be smart. But in my view, the communication and the dialogue is very, very important. And it's essential to manage the risks that we are facing with such an assertive China.
Yes. Okay, one more questions from the floor. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Martin Laflamme. I'm with the Canadian Trade Office here in Taipei. Building on the question of engagement, as I'm sure you've experienced yourself, China often uses engagement as a reward for what it sees as good behavior on the parts of its partners. So how do we entice Beijing into having some discussions with us when it will often be reluctant to talk just because it feels the relationship is not ready for discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting to me right now is, at least at the nation state level, in many cases, China is reaching out. China is wanting the engagement. We just saw the Australian Prime Minister go to China. China was very welcoming of that visit. They actually, made some policy changes in advance of the visit to set a good atmosphere. To me, that is China responding in an environment where Australia stood up to their coercion. Australia's relationships with others in the region are strengthening. Its position is strengthening. So I think, if you have to approach China with real fortitude and strength, but when, I think that can also induce them to come to the table in a more productive manner as well. And I think the Australia case study is where they've been in the last couple of years and how China is now welcoming engagement with them. It's not rewarding, concessions on Australia's part. It's quite the opposite. It is recognizing that coercion didn't work and that they have to deal with Australia on a different basis.
Okay, because of time, thank you very much. Sorry that we have to cut short of this conversation, but we have a standing invitation sent to you, so next time please do visit in person in Taipei. You will find that we have built a vibrant democracy and a very prosperous life here.
I look forward to coming again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And next, we are going to take a short break.
Many thanks to the Honorable Michelle Leroy for the excellent keynote speech, and also thank you very much, Dr. Chen. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have the show break now. The next section, Conversation 1, will begin at 10:15. Please be advised to return before 10:15 so we can properly start the next section. We have prepared some refreshment and beverage out of the hall while you are social networking and exchanging ideas. Please be advised to bring your valuable with you at all times. Thank you.
News.